What constitutes a bad buyer? I want to know. I want to know what you think a bad buyer is in your opinion. And I'm willing to bet that if you ask 10 different resellers, you're going to get 10 different answers on this. And I think that maybe, just maybe, we are treating maybe buyers that have some issues, but we're treating some buyers as bad buyers when we shouldn't. So let's talk about that here on the other side. So without any further ado, let's go. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is John with Flippin' Ain't Easy. And bad buyers, we talk about them all the time on this channel. And I guess we're going to talk about them till the cows come home. But I think sometimes, and the purpose of making this video is in the middle of the night, not middle of the night, but like 6 a.m. I woke up thinking about this. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've had a string of pretty crappy buyers. And I was thinking that maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong down below what you guys think about this, but I think sometimes we are a little too harsh on our buyers, right? And I get it. We're sellers. I think eBay, they treat us in a way where they expect more from us than the buyers. There's a little kind of resentment between seller and buyer. Not all sellers resent buyers, but a lot do. And then when a buyer doesn't kind of act the way they should or handle the situation the way they should, we kind of label them as a bad buyer. What are you talking about, John? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. One example is, and look, I'm guilty of this too. Before I get started on any of this stuff, I'm guilty of this too. But I think sometimes we need to reflect on what we're doing as resellers. And are we doing this kind of just for fun or just on the side? And, if you're doing it like that, then just kind of keep doing what you're doing. But if you're trying to convert what you're doing over to a serious business mindset, I really think we need to look differently at these buyers. And case in point is you have many people, and look, I was one of them myself, who would receive multiple questions from a buyer and say, okay, strike three, you're out. Look, I did it too. You guys can go back to videos and see where I was talking about, look, I don't got time for this. I've got, things to do. I don't have time to answer 30,000 questions, especially if the answer's in the listing. But come on. We can't expect every buyer to play the way we want them to play. Of course, the way we want them to play is pull up the listing, look at all the photos, click on, if they're on the app, click on the link that takes you to the item description and get all the information there because we put it there. But yet they'll send us a message with a question that could be easily answered in the photos or the item description. And that irritates us because the buyer's not doing their due diligence, so therefore we have to do extra work, and by God, it shouldn't happen that way, and therefore they start to become a bad buyer in our eyes. And then you answer the question, they come back with another question, and another question. And my rule was for many years, and I don't know when I stopped this, I think maybe early to middle of this year, because it's like, why am I doing this? Well, my rule was 3 strikes. You ask me 3 questions that you could have answered on your own, which is just ridiculous. This is telling me that you're not looking at the listing, then I'm blocking you. There's sellers who would block for a return request. Whether it's the buyer's fault or not, the idea that this buyer is trigger happy on the returns because they happen to return your item, who knows, it may have been the first return that they've ever sent. It's now a person that's a problem that you don't want to deal with. And I think it's the wrong mindset. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we should utilize, and I'll show you guys who want to stick around on how to get to the block buyers list, because you should have one. But I'm looking at mine, and it's just way too extensive. And I think there's also other sellers out there who are in the camp of, hey, let's all share a block buyers list and let's put together this huge compilation of buyers, and let's really show these bad buyers that they can't push us around collectively. But the problem is, you're going to have sellers that are blocking buyers for all kinds of reasons. And I'm willing to bet, and I'll just speak for myself, that half of the block buyers that I have blocked right now are just regular people. They don't have an agenda. They're not trying to scam people. They're not trying to put one over on sellers. They just had a bad experience, and or they asked me too many questions. They reached out. But then we want to complain, and this is, again, I'm not talking at you guys. I'm talking at myself. Instead of a mirror here, I've got a camera. And, we want to complain about, a buyer who buys an item from us, but yet they don't ask any questions. And then they get it, and they open a return because it's not what they wanted. Had they have asked the questions, we would have been able to make it clear to them, or provide clarity to them, that this isn't the item that you should be buying. You should be buying a different item, so that way we can save each other some time. So which is it? Do we want them to ask questions, or do we not? And if we want them to ask questions, then we should be okay with any number of questions. And it provides an opportunity for you and I to give good customer service. And I think most people aren't sitting there trying to, waste your time. They're just trying, when they're asking questions, either they didn't read. It's going to happen, guys. You just got to accept it. Either they didn't read, or it's not clear. And or maybe they just want to clarify, just to double check. How many of us in our lives have double checked before? Double check that the information in the listing is indeed correct. So I'm having sort of an epiphany about the way I think about buyers, because, we need to really think about buyers a little differently. We need to really be thankful for people who decide to search for our item. They see our item in search. They are compelled to click on our item, and then they decide that it's good value and they're going to buy our item. Now, in between, they'll reach out and say, hey, I've got a question about this, and that shouldn't put anyone off, right? How about the times when a buyer buys an item and they'll buy it and they'll say, hey, I made a mistake. That puts a lot of people off. Automatically, the red flags go off. This is a scammer. This is a scammer, because they're now reaching out to me saying they want to change the address. But, hey, I've noticed it's happened to me too. Not on eBay, but I have this glitch that's going on for some reason on my phone. When I buy something on my phone, it gives a totally invalid address. It's not the one that I have stored. And, of course, I'm on autopilot half the damn time, and I think there's other people out there that are just like me, and it slides, and guess what? I get a notification that the package I had bought, or the item I bought, is being returned to sender. It's happened twice in the last 6 months because of my carelessness. And if I can be careless, so can my buyers. Our buyers are human, and we cannot expect them to be perfect. And if we're going to sit there and, our radar goes up anytime something off happens with the buyer, it's that what is called in the poker world. I don't know if any of you guys play poker, but it's the idea of monsters under your bed syndrome, where it's like, oh my goodness, I could be beat, or oh my goodness, this buyer is now, asking me a question. Oh my goodness, they're trying to change their address. They must be a scammer. And that's not to say you should change their address when they come calling, but how many of you guys out there have a process in place for that? An SOP. How many of you guys have, here's my threshold, because to say to all buyers, no, I can't help you, and being that inflexible, I don't think it's the best way to handle business. And that's the way I look at it. So I've set like $20, $25. I mean, if it's within reason. I mean, I'm going to do some research. If the buyer comes at me and says, hey, I made a mistake, I just bought your item, can we send it to Aunt Thelma at this address? Now, there's a couple things that I'm going to do. I'm going, because a lot of my items are calculated. So it could be that Aunt Thelma is on the other side of the world and they're maybe the next state over. It's going to be a higher shipping. And if that happens, I'm just going to say, look, we do calculated shipping. We're going to have to redo this. And you're going to have to put in Aunt Thelma's address again and be done with it. You know, getting your Christmas stuff shipped to the right address. And I'll be glad to help facilitate that. And you should be willing to help facilitate that and show a willingness to the buyer so that they are willing to work with you, because it's not, as many of you guys know, it's not a quick, fast process. When you have to undo all these transactions, you have to go in and cancel the transactions, do the address, and then you have to relist them, right? And maybe, just maybe, if someone's willing to work with you, you can relist that item without any promotions, where maybe you had it promoted before. So that way it's worth your while. You're saving a little bit on your eBay fees. eBay, don't hate me, but you know what? It's part of your game, not mine. And so it would be foolish to add a promotion to something that someone's going to immediately go and buy, and then allow them to change their address that way. But if it's like, hey, I moved down the street, my address is wrong, or maybe like my situation, for whatever reason, the address is just not a real address and it's not going to work. So to avoid a headache of a return to sender and we're back at square one, can I change my address before you ship this thing out? And I think that, if it's within your designated, and I think everyone needs to kind of make a rule for themselves. I believe firmly, from what I've been told by eBay, that if the buyer initiates that request and they put the actual address that they want it shipped to in the comments, that you will be covered and protected. This is what I've been told, and I've never had an issue with it. I've never encountered someone that ends up scamming me afterwards. And it may be something that in the future, as you know, I may expand that threshold to maybe 40, $50. And as long as the address is similar to where the shipping is not going to be more, I'm willing to take that change of address and just move on. But right now it's like 20, $25. And I think everyone's got to make that decision. Do we want to make the buying process tougher on the buyers? Because eBay does a heck of a job of making it tougher sometimes. Or do we want to try to help eBay facilitate a low effort customer experience? And that low effort customer experience is going to have that buyer come back. I've read so many negative feedbacks in the last week when I'm just looking at other sellers, because I like to go in and see what other sellers are doing on the site, where people have left negative feedback saying, I'm never going to buy on eBay again. This is the worst transaction I've ever dealt with. How many people out there are pushing buyers away simply because of the way we treat them or don't want to interact with them? It's like this unwillingness to provide customer service. It's like, and I think there's a lot of folks out there, not saying the majority, but there's a number of folks out there that sell on eBay that maybe have never interfaced with a customer in their life. Maybe they used to work construction or something like that, and now they're coming here. I'm going to sell on eBay and I'm going to make all this money, and never thinking twice that they are now going to need on some level to interface with the customer, and that totally turns them off, and they sort of run away from it. They don't want to deal with it. I really think that we should embrace the customer experience. We talked about this on the PPP, the Profit Playbook podcast, and I really think we should embrace dealing with customers and do a better job of dealing with those customers. And I've had some bad customers, guys. I'm going to give you just an example here, a couple examples. The first one is, remember that return request that I had for that lock set, and it was sold for parts or repair. And they said that, I realized that I bought this for parts or repair, but I contacted the company. The company is called Lockily. Anyone hear of that company? It's a door lock set, and they use, it's like a thumbprint to get in and out of your house if you maybe didn't bring your keys. Well, it's one of those locks. And so, where it is right here. It's all over the place. So they opened a return, and they circumvented my return policy by saying that it was not as described, not as pictured. And it is as pictured. And just because they bought it, and I'm sure they didn't read, even though I had parts in the title, and I also I put it in two places that this is for parts or repair, no returns, but they can override that no return policy by doing an INAD like they did to me. And guess what? I provided them a FedEx label for the return. Now it was an 8x6x6 box that they received, and guess what they did to me? And for many of you guys, and this is a tip maybe that you can learn from, that I can learn from. I shipped them this. Actually, they shipped me back this FedEx box. Okay, not the box I shipped them. It is much larger than 8x6x6. So right then and there, this buyer, who is a seller by the way, and probably wanting to be a jerk to me, they shipped it in a larger box than necessary, and because I have the dimensions in the listing, that's what eBay charges me for that size of box. Now, if a buyer uses the wrong size of box, I'm looking at an adjustment that FedEx is going to send eBay, and eBay is not going to eat it. Guess what? They're going to pass that on to me. So an $11 label now turns into like $20-something. Horrible. Now, I didn't adjust the refund. I gave them a full refund because eBay doesn't want us to adjust refunds when the buyer, does a false INAD, and you're on the hook for the outbound shipping and the return shipping. And in this case, I'm on the hook for the return shipping with the wrong size box and a much higher return label. And I thought about going in there and adjusting the refund, but I said, you know what? After everything's said and done, just going to move on. This is FedEx box. Guess what was in the FedEx box? They had this with the item in the FedEx box. Now that is against USPS postal regulations because you can't ship USPS when you're shipping FedEx for one, and you can't use the boxes for anything other than USPS. But there's more. Inside that box, they used a bubble mailer to put the lock set in here, to put in the box, Can't make this up. And this is a seller on the platform. And if you go back a few videos back, you'll see the seller. I don't care. They deserve to be put on blast because this particular seller, it breaks all the rules as both buyer and seller. And if this is how they ship their stuff, this is the thing, man. I got to tell you, this is what makes good sellers look bad. And I don't care if a seller is put on blast for doing the wrong things, because when one seller screws up, people think of not that seller. They think, I ain't coming back to eBay. And when they say they're not coming back to eBay, they're not doing business with you and I for something we didn't do. And we should get rid of those sellers. These are real people. A lot of them might have issues. They have things going on that we don't know. And if we knew what some of these people were dealing with, maybe family members in the hospital, maybe about to lose their job, who knows? But to expect every buyer, and I'm not making excuses for buyers at all, and these bad buyers are going to be around until the end of eBay. And we're just going to have to deal with it as sellers. We're just going to have to embrace that this is the norm. This shouldn't ruin your day. And while it is disappointing, especially when you have a $200 return, it's going to be disappointing. But we need to deal with it. For me, I think that I would rather have the business of somebody who's going to ask as many questions as they need to ask instead of asking none at all. And I'm going to continue to use this block buyers list, but I'm going to reserve it for people who deserve it, like someone that opens a fraudulent return. Well, you lost my business. That I'm not going to deal with you again about. If you decide to scam me, legitimately scam me by sending back a rock or something that's not what I sent you, we all kind of know who the real bad buyers are. But the buyers who just didn't see what you put in your listing, or didn't look at the photo, or made a mistake in their address, or didn't think to ask the question, or ask too many questions, I really think that we need to really think and recategorize how we classify as a bad buyer. And I want to know what you guys think down below. Put your comments down below, and do me a favor, hit that like button. We talk about on the lives, you get your sale within the next 24 hours. And on this channel, That applies even on videos. So hit that like button to get your sale within the next 24 hours. And do me a favor also, if you watch this channel a lot, why not subscribe? I'm really trying to build up the channel, and we're kind of over 25,000 subs. It's the dream of mine at one point to get to 100K. That's the goal, and I can't do it without you guys hitting that sub button, and I'd appreciate that. Guys, you gotta have to put up with it. These people are here to stay, and we can think of them as the enemy, or we can think of them as our customers. And aside from the people who scam you, that really scam you, that deserve to be blocked, I really think many of us, including myself, have overused this block buyer button, and I really think we should maybe draw up a process, an SOP, as to what constitutes a bad buyer, and what bad buyers are you going to block, and which ones are you just going to pardon as someone that may have special needs, may have a tough time in life, and may need a little extra help. And while it's a little extra effort, and I think that's the mistake a lot of us fall into, thinking, oh, I'm now a full-time reseller, I don't have to put in the effort I had to put in at my last job. If you remember the jobs that you used to have, a lot of those customers, or some of those customers, you had to put in some extra effort. And guess what? They were still allowed to do business with you at the end of the day. And on eBay, it shouldn't be any different. But figuring all that out and applying that to your business is yet another example of how flipping ain't easy. I want you guys to have an excellent rest of your day, and we will talk to you very soon.